Folks, welcome to AMAZE Live. I'm thrilled to have Catherine Connors on. Hi, Catherine.
Christine.
I feel like I've known you forever, but I haven't seen you in person in a really long time. So this is kind of like the next best thing.
It is. It's close enough.
Yeah, it's close enough. So I know we have a lot to dig into regarding girl culture today, which I'm very excited to talk to you about. But I just wanted to start because you have a very interesting backstory. So I just was wondering if quickly you could kind of like give us some broad strokes about your pivot from academia to where you are now, or multiple pivots, I should say.
Multiple pivots. Yeah. No, it's been a windy road, but I think that it's been a coherent one. So as you know, Christine, in my deep dark past, I was an academic. I and my field, interestingly, given where I landed, was primarily focused on the place of women and girls in the history of political and social thought. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how we tell stories about women's lives and who tells those stories and how we understand women and girls as part of the public sphere, as citizens, or in, sadly, for much of human history, not quite citizens. So I had spent a lot of time digging into those questions. Um, when I was on maternity leave with Amelia, who is now 12 and a half and firmly in the realm of girl culture, which is hard to
Yes.
I fell into the world of mom blogs, quite by accident, or I should say maybe not quite by accident, because it was, as it was for many of us, out of a little bit of desperation. And as an academic, was fascinated, by this space for women to tell their stories. Um, the road got windy after that. I ended up leaving academia, starting a digital consultancy. Of course, had my blog, Her Bad Mother, still do. Um, Ended up at Babbel, which was acquired by Disney, which put me, in a seat at Disney, that really dug into women and girls storytelling from the point of view of a very large cultural institution. And then I left Disney to begin the work that led to Maverick, which is part of what we'll talk about today.
Yes, I'm very excited to talk about that. And I kind of love that we both, I know at one time or other, we've both referred to ourselves as recovering academics, which, which I sort of discovered later. I just thought that was really funny.
Yes.
Okay, so that is all very amazing, and I will be linking up the various things you mentioned. But we originally started talking about this Facebook Live, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, when the movie Eighth Grade came out. That now feels like a million years ago because the summer has just been, I don't know, chaos. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that movie. I'm assuming you've seen it already, because it's just so relevant to where we're going with this conversation today.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like, in the digital age that we're living in, media time is very different from real time. So the culture speeds by so fast that something that was just really a few weeks ago can feel like it was a million years ago, which is the case with eighth grade. Although I feel like we're still talking about it. Certainly parents are talking about it. I belong to a lot of Facebook groups about parenting, raising, empowering tween and teen girls and kids, and eighth grade is very much a topic of conversation. What I love about the movie is that it really, I think, super accurately, almost painfully accurately captures the condition of being, not just a girl in today's culture, but a kid in today's culture. I read an interview with the director, Bo Burnham, who is himself a YouTuber, about why he chose a girl to be the main character instead of a boy, given that he himself was a male YouTuber. And he said that it was really an emotional story that he wanted to tell. He wanted to tell the story of the emotional experience of kids in the age of digital, and that girls live much more immediately in that emotional experience, and that it would be a truer emotional story if it was told with a girl. And I think that it really captures that. I mean, we tend to think of digital as a space that elides or blurs or confuses emotionality, but for kids and for girls in particular, it is really a space in which they explore different emotional identities, different psychological identities, different expressions of their emotion, sometimes really painful expressions of
Yes.
emotion. And I think that's what's so powerful about the movie. I think what's so uncomfortable about the movie for many people.
Did you now? I'm curious. Did you manage to take your daughter? Because I know I heard there was a lot of hubbub because it's an R-rated movie. So that makes it a little complicated depending on how strict one's theater is. Like, I'm curious if she saw it and had a reaction that was like, okay, this really captures what's happening.
I haven't taken her yet. We've been talking about it. She had heard a little bit about it. I think
Yep.
she's a little bit not entirely comfortable about the idea of sitting in a theater with me, seeing that.
Yes.
Knows about it. As much as I would love for the state of things to be, I think every parent would with their daughters who are in this age group to be like, we'll just share everything. We're definitely in that stage where she wants to share a lot, but I think that kind of raw exposure to an emotional experience is maybe a bit uncomfortable for her. So we're talking about it. We talked about it just this weekend.
Yeah, interesting. I just wanted to share a little high five hello from Allison, who we both know, who has just sent somebody off to her daughter off to college, which is mind blowing. I'm just catching up on the internet after a week off. And which is a good reminder, if you're coming to this broadcast now, or if you're coming later, we have a lot of people who come to the broadcast later. Please feel free to drop any questions or comments for Catherine in the comment section, and we'll get to it later. So I have a question. You know, my daughter's very close in age to yours. She's 13, soon to be 14. And, you know, she just finished 8th grade this spring, and I was just both surprised and perhaps a little puzzled by how different her experience was to mine. I feel like I'm curious if you have that experience with Amelia, but like, I felt like I was just consumed by angst constantly, you know, when I was younger. And that just does not seem to be the case with her, nor has there been a ton of friend drama. And it occurred to me, I wanted to ask you if you feel like the sort of real swell of positive messaging for girls and empowerment messaging, do you think that's sinking in and that's why things are so different? Or it's just that we're just different and tuned in as parents? I mean, it's probably a multifactorial equation, but I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that, just both on personal experience and what you've observed culturally.
It's such a good question. I mean, my experience of 7th grade was pretty easy. You know, 8th grade was tougher. I have a very good friend of mine, who's a musician, Jill Sobiel, actually, was planning an album last year that she ended up calling Nostalgia Kills, but at one point the title was F 7th grade. It was, on this belief that so many of us had this experience of 7th grade that was extraordinarily painful. So I feel like it's 7th or 8th grade, somewhere in that period between like 11 and a half to 13 and a half, 14, we tend to think of as particularly difficult. When I look at Amelia's experience in 7th grade, and she's starting 8th grade this week, I think that it's been an emotionally complicated experience. She's not expressing the amount of angst that I think I felt, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said in the conversation about whether I'd taken her to 8th grade, I try to be careful about how much I try to pull that out of her. About how much angst she is feeling. I know that it was a complicated social experience for her in 7th grade. I do think that the culture we're in now, where, to your point, there's a lot of very pro-girl messaging, and I want to come back to that. There are also many more outlets for social connection and engagement and identity expression. However, there's also all that much more space for anxiety, right? And things that impact. There's so much research. We can come back to this on how social platforms can really impact girls and young people, everyone's self-esteem. So although I think that girls are much more, literate now in the culture, in the sort of the language of empowerment, I think that it's still complicated for them, because on the one hand, we tell them repeatedly, and we have all these messages, hashtags, girl, that say you can be anything, but they're still living in a culture that gets in the way of that, right? So it's still not the reality that they can actually, the numbers show, like, the wage gap isn't getting any better, the leadership gap isn't getting any better. So I think that while at the same time they're much more aware of the idea that they should feel powerful, I think that they're actually under increasing pressure to reconcile that should with their own realities.
Yeah, I agree. Very well said. And it's interesting, sort of the pros and cons of social too. I mean, just last night we were having a conversation with her about okay, if you're doing something for your birthday, can you limit the social media so there's no hurt feelings about it? It's just so much more complicated. Everything is so complicated. But this actually leads me, so connecting the movie to what you're doing now. So I have not seen Eighth Grade, as I mentioned, but I did read up on it on Common Sense Media, which is one of my favorite go-tos when I'm just kind of looking for reviews. And actually, I don't know if you know Sandy Chen, but she's a fellow writer, blogger, and she actually wrote the review for that. So I was like, yay, I love her. But you know, it sounds like the depictions of challenges around social media are quite on point with this movie, which leads me to your work. And I just would love for you to share about Maverick and why you felt so passionate about creating this platform, and how you think it will impact girl culture. I know that's a lot right there, but
it's a lot, but it's one tidy little bundle, or I should say, it's one messy little bundle. Um, Maverick didn't start as an idea for a social platform, and in fact, we've struggled a lot internally about the extent to which we call it that. The seeds for Maverick really started for me when I was still at the Walt Disney Company, and I was working hard within the context of the company to push them to do something in the arena of women and girls that was less about marketing and more about actual hands-on engagement. My feeling at the time was that it was great, to my point from a few minutes ago, that everybody is very invested in pro-girl messaging. But my fear at that point is, which remains, is that the pro-girl messaging can actually have problematic effects if it's not backed up by real hands-on work to give girls opportunity to really experience and practice their own power, especially when everything we know about, from the research, and the research has been consistent for many, many decades, that disproportionately girls fall into what's sometimes known as the confidence gap, or the period of loss of voice around puberty. On the order of like 3/4 of them stop raising their hands, drop out of team sports, are less likely to run for leadership positions in school. And I really felt that there needed to be something that would give them, help get them through the confidence gap. And I had hoped that the Walt Disney Company might be a place for that. The company was really, really supportive, but things move very slowly in that kind of institution. So I left Disney to figure it out. It became clear over the course of research, working with girls, trying to dig into what the what would be, that no solution was really going to be effective if it didn't meet girls where they are. And where they are is in digital media. It's where we all are, right? So we realized early on that it would need to be some sort of, or need to involve a digital platform. As we began digging into what that digital platform would look like, it became clear that this was much more than just trying to shift girl culture and girls' experiences, that it was also tackling broader issues with social media. That when you look at not just kids' experience or girls' experience of Instagram or Musical.ly or Snapchat, it's all of our experiences that society, we all know about the experiences of bullying and trolling and that sort of thing. So it also became this effort to try to reshape those experiences. So Maverick, ultimately, we created it with this idea that it would be both a digital space and live experiences, so that we could connect the digital and the real. Working out what that digital platform would be became arguably the more important part, simply because that's where so much of this culture evolves and lives and is experienced by girls. So built the platform that was based on a couple of things. One was that the central activity should not just be social exchange, that it should be somehow active, that it should be a space where girls would be encouraged, girls and young women be encouraged to exercise their powers of creativity, innovative thinking, that kind of thing. So we put this idea of challenges at the core, that you would be challenged by a role model or a peer to do something unusual or different, sometimes silly or fun. The other,
can you give an example, just like for anybody who's tuning in, just like a random example of one of those kinds of challenges?
I'll give you two. I'll give you a couple that represent the spectrum. So the Olympic gymnast Laurie Hernandez is one of a group of girls that we call our founding Mavericks, who are young women who are a little bit older than our core cohort, who function as sort of role models. They're also kind of at-large creative directors for us, who give us a lot of feedback on the platform and the culture that we're developing. Laurie did a challenge that was simply called Stick the Landing. She just invited girls to show off their best gymnastics move, whether it's a cartwheel, a flip, a somersault, a leap in the air, You know, and it got responses from girls ranging from, you know, very interesting, complicated gymnastics moves that I certainly couldn't do, that just tumbles on the ground, right? Another was from Chloe and Halle Bailey, who are also founding Mavericks. They're currently opening for Beyonce and Jay-Z, so they're on their tour right now. They're
Yep.
pretty. They did a challenge just about a month ago that invited girls to think about what they loved about themselves and then create a song around it, you know, and then share that song in the app. We've had challenges, one from Mary Wilson, you know, who's an activist about finding your cause, one from the creator of Notorious RBG, about how would you brand the movement. We've had girls challenge each other, and those can be as silly as how many socks can you put on in 1 minute to year, or what are you most proud of, share it in a video or an image. So the idea is that they start conversations with each other, and that the core action in the app is to actually do something and create a
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of that then is to make sure we've created an environment that's inherently positive. So you don't see how many followers other people have. You can see yourself who's following you, but there's no follower count that appears on your profile. There aren't likes in the conventional sense. We have badges, so you can indicate what you think of somebody's content or what they're doing through a badge that says unstoppable or daring or awesome, or funny. There's no amassing of likes as a sort of quantitative measure of your popularity. It's also community moderated. It's COPPA compliant. You know, we've done everything we can to create as safe and positive a space as we can. And it's in fact the number one thing that we hear from girls when we talk to them, we talk to them a lot, is that it's a safe space and it's a positive space. It's a space where they can, as one girl told me a couple of weeks ago, be weird, right?
Yeah.
It's an experiment with their identity.
Cool, cool. And I just have another question. If you can just speak up a touch because your sound was going in and out. I have no idea why. It's probably the tech, not you. But you also had at least one, maybe another kind of like a puberty related challenge. Was it around menstruation or something? I'm trying to remember exactly what it was.
Yes, that's it was by Scarlett Curtis, you know, who's a writer and an activist, and especially around you know, around issues facing shame about periods. And so she did one about battling period shame that was really, really interesting because it wasn't one of the challenges that got as many responses as, say, Chloe and Halle's or Laurie Hernandez's did, but it did prompt girls to be really, really, really open. And in fact, there was one girl who responded to the challenge that had so much to say on the issue that she did a little response in Maverick, and then she said, go to my YouTube. And she did this whole long YouTube monologue on how she has grappled with period shame, you know, and the like. So we know that it struck a chord. It's also one of the topics that we get, you know, requests for, you know, conversations that girls want to have, that they just don't feel like there's a real safe space to have it in other social platforms. I think much like for you and I, when we were new moms, you know, we found the internet and it was like, where can we talk about postpartum depression? Where can we talk about trouble breastfeeding, that kind of thing? Girls are looking for the same safe spaces. And so we're actively trying to cultivate that.
I love that. And I love that it's such a mix of things because you can't be heavy and intense all the time. And you can't, you know, and it's good to balance the silly with, you know, the serious. So I think that's really, really awesome. Are girls, do you feel like the community, I don't know, is it gelling in a way where you feel like it's doing what you envisioned, or is it doing something different than what you envisioned?
We'd always imagined, we always knew that girls would make it their own, that they would quote unquote hack the platform, and we wanted to see how they would do that. So we still consider ourselves in beta to some extent. It's only been rolled publicly for 3.5 months. And we still consider it a phase in which we're watching what girls do and seeing how they're using the platform. So for example, we knew that at one point we would open up the ability.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We would create the feature for girls to issue their own challenges. We actually didn't have that at our public launch, but we saw girls actually sort of hacking their own responses to create challenges. So we really the feature very, very quickly. We're seeing now and also hearing from them that they're using the challenge framework as a way to start conversations with each other. So we're actively developing group chat features so that and conversations because they're forcing the issue. They're showing us and telling us in the surveys we give them that they want to be able to have conversations with each other that aren't focused around creating a piece of content, but actually just talking.
That's really cool. And I know you kind of diplomatically referenced earlier, but I will say one of the great things about founding your own thing and doing your own thing is that you can be nimble and you can respond to these changes, to really shape it to what your audience, because your audience is is a real catalyst for how, things change and develop. So I think that is really, really awesome. Give me some really quick, so it's on, it's on Apple. What do you call it? It's on iOS.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm an Android person. That's why I'm like, what is it called? And so what's why don't you, if you can tell people, your target age range, like the ages that this is best for, how to find it, and when it's coming for Android, because I think that's in the pipeline, right?
It is absolutely in the pipeline. So we are currently available on iOS. It's optimized for iPhone and iPads, and on web, so you can access it through your web browser on any device.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's not as good experience as it is on iOS, but it's definitely it's there. Android is coming this fall.
Good.
It's very, very excited. It's the number one question we get. We are international, so it is available on iOS, and on web globally. We actually have a lot of users in the UK, and in Southeast Asia. It is interesting, the question of who our core age group is. I mean, we describe it as being for girls, very, very true, right? But we have two really primary cohorts. One is girls who are between the ages of about 10 and 14. I think the youngest user set is closer to 8. Like I said before, we are COPPA compliant, so privacy is protected, parent validation, the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very important for us, given that we wanted to reach girls before the confidence gap, that it be accessible to them and safe for them. And then we have another strong cohort at the higher end of teens and college age, which has been very, very interesting for us.
Cool.
Finding they seem to engage in a way that's like big sisters. And in fact, once we saw that activity developing, we created a cohort that we call peer community leaders. We currently have a small group who function as interns. We've made them. They're young women between the ages of about 17 and 23 who are in the app every day, keeping an eye on conversation, interacting with the girls. When we see young women in the app who are really engaging in this capacity as role model types, we invite them to consider becoming peer community leaders. So it's creating this organic young mentorship cycle that we think is really, really powerful.
Very cool. Now, I know we're running down on time here, but I would love to know, is there anything that, I mean, I know there's a lot to the platform and we're not getting to everything, but any major things that we haven't covered that you would love to let the AMAZE community know about? Also, I don't know if you're still looking for parent ambassadors, anything like that. I just want to make sure we, get to the top of any of that stuff.
Yeah, no, we have so much going on. The parent community is a huge thing for us that we are actively in the process of trying to really build community around in a more meaningful way. So we're definitely interested in hearing from parents. We're definitely interested in parent feedback because so much of our community is on the young end. It's important that we have parents and families on side. We also believe really firmly that if we're going to empower girls, then we need to strengthen those communities. So it's as much about having sort of permission and validation from parents as it is selfishly on my part, because I feel like I need another parent community now as much as I did when Amelia was a newborn.
Yes.
Age where we don't talk as much about these years. There aren't as many books about these years. And I think creating that cycle of community is really, really important. So any parents out there that want to be involved in Maverick, definitely give me a shout on Facebook.
That's great. I will. I might ask you for the link to the parent piece later, or I'll just look it up. But I will link it into the comments here so people can access that directly too. Also, I'm really sorry to you and everybody else that my notifications, I thought they were off, and they are clearly not off, and it's very annoying. So I apologize for that. Well, Catherine, this was so lovely to be able to chat with you about this, just to see your face, which was lovely, and to chat about this project. We have such overlap with our communities. I'm looking forward to continuing to, support what you guys do. It's just awesome. And again, anybody who's coming to this broadcast later, please drop any comments or questions and we'll get back to you. Anything else that you wanted to say, Catherine, or are you feeling like we, covered the basics?
Oh, there's a million things I could say, but I feel like we covered the bases. If anyone wants to find us there, of course, I think you'll note the URL for the website, but the primary portal for that community is through our Facebook page, which is /Gen Maverick. And we have a parent group there as well, which is where we're actively building that community and having our conversations about the, art and craft and work that this is. So people can check that out too.
Fabulous. I will link all that up because speaking of meeting people where they're at, we know the parents are still on Facebook. We still like the Facebook. Anyway, yes, thank you for joining me, Catherine. And thanks, folks, for joining us today for AMAZE Live. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, Christine.
Bye.